Welcome back to another episode of Choose Courage Inc., where we help creatives, entrepreneurs, and aspiring corporate escape artists break free from the systems that were never built for them and instead create businesses where people, creativity, and courage come first. I'm Vivianne Castillo, founder of Choose Courage Inc., and today I'm doing something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I'm bringing my assistant Annie on the mic. Annie's been with me for about 4 years now. She has edited every podcast you've ever heard from me. She set up every webinar I've ever held. She has sat through some of the hardest seasons of running this business, and she's also become a friend. And so a lot of y'all ask me, how do you do everything, Vivianne? How are you a functioning adult? And the answer is Annie. Annie has done so much for me in the business. And so on this episode, and this is a recording of a live session that we were able to host. And on this, we sit down and we spill some tea. You know, we talk about how we met, how we actually work together day to day, the real mistakes I've made along the way, and answers to the questions that folks submitted during this live session, as well as things that people have asked me ahead of time about hiring help and what it actually takes to build something that doesn't run on your last nerve and runs you into the ground. So pour your coffee, get your tea, get your water, and let's get into it. All right, here's the deal for today. I just wanted to hold space and have a conversation with my lovely assistant, Annie, about, what is it like hiring someone, working with the founder? What are things to consider? I feel like I don't see a lot of conversations like this being had. And I was talking to Annie the other day. I'm like, I think it would just be helpful for people to understand a little bit about our working relationship, how it is your experience working with me, things that people should consider, and all that jazz. So I kind of view this as Annie we're just having a casual conversation. I will hold space at the end for live Q&A. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vivianne Castillo. I'm the founder of Choose Courage Inc. My background is in counseling and human services, specifically trauma and addiction. And then I made a career switch into the tech and UX industry, thinking I wouldn't need those skills. And I had just white knuckled those even harder since switching into tech. These days, I'm spending more time building Choose Courage Inc. after founding and creating a consultancy called Humanity Centered, where we mainly worked with companies to help them be healthier and less crappy to people, as well as how they handle their products. And with Choose Courage Inc., these days, I'm really just focused on helping people be and feel more free through entrepreneurship. So I spend a lot of my time working with folks in UX and tech who are either deep in corporate and they're done and they're trying to get out, or they've already walked out and now they're figuring out what comes next and how to build what comes next for them. And today I'm going to hold space for a conversation with me and Annie. Annie and I have been working together for about 4 years. Some tea and context to how we met. So let's see. I actually met Annie on one of those websites where you can hire a virtual assistant and loved working. Actually, Annie told me a story right before we hopped on this call I'm going to have her speak into about her realizing that she was working with me. But I found Annie on this website. It was really great. I felt like they were paying her well. So I was like, what if I steal you off this platform and we work together? Would you be down for that? And since then, we've continued on for the ride. But Annie, I know you said you were like afraid that you were gonna wait. What was the story?
I was terrified when I started. No. Well,
Wait, share some context to it though, so people
Okay.
aren't like, man.
Oh, no. So I applied for this job, right? I did the interview, everything, all the steps, and they never called me back. A month after, they were like, "Hey, they're looking." The person who told me about the job, they were like, "Hey, they're looking for you. Answer your phone or call them back. They really need the assistant, right? You're starting tomorrow." I didn't even have training. And what the story I was told, it was like, hey, so this client, we assigned her an assistant, but she didn't like her. So she's really tough. I think the level of her English was really low. So I was an interpreter. So that's why they just hooked me up. Oh, she knows English, right? So go with her. But I was terrified. I was like, what if she fires me in my first day? And actually my husband was like, hey, just give it a try. If you don't like it, then you can quit. right? That's it. And of course, that was like not the case. Knowing Vivian, I know she might have done a pretty awful job for her to not want her. Because I know Vivian gives opportunities, explains everything. So, yeah, but that's the story.
Here's the context of what happened. So we were my first assistant, and I did let her go after a day and a half. The first assistant that was assigned to me, I gave her a task of, hey, I want you to listen to this transcript, clean it up, and let me know when it's done. So she did that. At the time, I had another assistant who actually was my best friend. We could talk a little bit about what things to consider when working with friends and family, but she's my best friend of 18 years. So it was fine. But I had my assistant at the time look over her work, and my assistant was like, I feel like it's more work for me to fix all these mistakes than for me to have just done it by myself. And for me, it was like it's kinda like the first task, and for there to be, like, so many mistakes, I was like, just I was trying to trust my gut more in this season. And, I don't know about some of y'all where maybe you should have exited a relationship or an employer sooner. You just knew in your gut it wasn't it. So I was taking that as a moment to trust my gut. And the company at the time was like, "No, just, give her some time, train her up." And I was like, "No, I'm gonna trust my gut with this one, and I need a different assistant." And I'm literally hearing the story from Annie for the first time 10 minutes ago of her being like, "Yeah, I was, like, terrified to work with you because they said you were a difficult client." I'm like, "Annie, I got you." So that's some context into how Annie and I started working together. And actually, and even another layer to that is when I started working with Annie, I was actually splitting her time. Me and another friend were pulling our resources together to share Annie. So it was like both of us were running our own businesses. We're like, hey, we need some help, but we don't can't necessarily afford a full-time assistant. So what if we split resources and share an assistant? So that's context here. All right. I wanna dive into, again, another maybe context layer before we'll pull Annie in, is one question I often get is, how does someone actually know that it's time to hire an assistant? What's the difference between being overwhelmed and being ready to hire? And for me, when I think about overwhelm, overwhelm is not a hiring signal. For me, overwhelm is a signal that something's off in how your business is built. And if you hire an assistant from a place of overwhelm, what you're really doing is handing someone else your chaos and asking them to make sense of it. And that's not delegation, that's dumping, right? So the way that I think about it now, especially after building 2 companies, is you're ready to hire when you can answer 3 questions. First, what do I need to specifically hand off? If you're an entrepreneur, I don't think you realize like how much is in your head and how much you keep to yourself. Not, I need help, but what are the actual tasks? What are actual decisions, the things that someone else can own? And if you can't write the role in concrete terms, then you're not ready to hire. I promise you, I think that's what happened. Annie, give me a gut check of what your sense of what it was like working with my friend when we were sharing you. Of if you come into a relationship with an assistant and you're just like, all right, I just need help, then it's really difficult for you, right? To show up and actually figure out how to support.
Yeah, totally. So that was fun. Right now, having a comparison. So this was my first time being an assistant, right? A virtual assistant. So I was learning on the way. And remember, they threw me to my job. It was really, really difficult to work with a friend in comparison with Vivianne. Because first of all, I think Sam did an amazing job at having all these processes being set. So with the friend, it felt more like he would ask me things when it was like really urgent right now. Like and things I didn't even know to how to do, right? He would just, "Hey, finish this list." And I would have no idea what it is. So it was just I think it was just wasting his time and my time because at the end it wasn't the result they wanted.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can totally see. And it's not gonna work. I'm not gonna help, right? Your assistant is not gonna be able to help you if something is really urgent and you were just not able to finish it and you cannot delegate. Yeah, or have the exact outcome you want from this.
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, in the beginning with Annie, some things that I did was I would, like, Loom record certain tasks that I wanted to pass off and have her watch it and then create an SOP from it. So, like, how do I show versus tell? Because especially if I'm like, I actually don't have the energy to type out step by step how you do something. So let me show her, share the screen, record it. Sometimes I would do several recordings of the same task just so she could understand a little bit of what that looked like. And then she would create an SOP and she would then, anytime I would need that task done, she would have a point of reference of how to do it. I was also the kind of person where I was like, "Annie, all I want you to do over the next 3 days is read this book." I read this book, I feel like it gave me clarity in terms of how to organize, how to delegate things, and I need you to just, like, sync with me. So, that's actually all I want you to do over these 3 days. There'd be times where Annie would just be doing a training on Shopify for a few days or do training on Zapier. So a lot of those first like few months, it was just learning how to take things that were in my mind and communicate it to Annie so she can create a process for it, as well as what are the tools I need her to be trained in. So she can help me with automations, she can help me with my systems. Because one of the quotes that I love, and a lot of my clients will always hear me quote it, it comes from James Clear. He said, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And so it's really important to, I think, if you are going to consider working with an assistant, to think about what are the systems that you need to train them in? What are the tasks that you need to delegate and take off your plate? And so the other thing too is, well, actually, let me pause here. Annie, I wonder if you have anything to add about what do you think people should know about training like an assistant in terms of expectation, what's helpful, what was not helpful? Was there anything I did where you're like, that was done differently. That would have been great. Safe space, Annie. Safe space.
Okay. First of all, I think you were right. Like delegation sounds easy until you realize you have to explain how your brain works, right?
Yeah.
It's it's not that easy. I don't know. There are some things, lesson learnings that I can't think of maybe at the end I'll think about some time. But I do.
Okay.
So this is what I've thought about. I think when you hire somebody, right? When you're looking for an assistant, I think people like over focus on finding people that already know like all the tools and all the things. When it's
Mhm.
I think it's better when you find someone who can think, who can adapt, who can care. You know, I think that's what works great between me and you. That's why we work so well together because I was a blank sheet and you were able to train me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You were open and curious.
Exactly, and you were willing to teach me. The time I spent learning Zapier and Shopify and everything before even looking at your account, right? I did all these trainings, so I was ready when I was and I don't think that happens a lot with a lot of assistants. They're usually like, "Hey, here's my account, and you have to do this. Watch the tutorial." But
Hmm.
it was really helpful to learn basics and everything. And something okay. Something I wish you didn't do, and this was, like, maybe at the beginning, I don't know, to assume I understood, maybe, or to assume doing the task once, that was it. 'Cause there are a lot of mistakes there, and
Yes.
I miss things right now, right?
Mhm.
But I think you're really open to that too.
Yeah, and even when Annie does miss things, it's like, all right, well, what's the process to make sure that we don't miss that again? And it really is what's the checklist within the SOP that needs to be updated, right? What are the notes that you need to make sure that you're checking this or checking that? But a lot of it is you have to resist the temptation of, I'll just do it because it'll be quicker if I do it. You have to be patient and give grace and space. In the same way with us and our employers, our former employers, that we want opportunity to learn, to understand. We also have to extend that too with the folks that we're working with. Same principle. So I remember there's a couple even guardrail kind of rules that we put in. So I remember in the beginning, because again, Annie has always been very curious, very proactive, and she was asking a lot of questions. Or she would be like stuck on, okay, how do I solve this and what do I do with this? So we implemented a rule called the 1-3-1 rule. So every now and then I would tell Annie, all right, let's 1-3-1 this. So the way that this would work is I would tell Annie, okay, if we're gonna 1-3-1 this problem, number one is what is the problem that we're trying to solve and fix right now? Three, what are three potential solutions and approaches we could take to fixing that? And then going back to one, what's the one that you picked as a solution and tell me why? And part of that is I want Annie and anyone who I work with to feel like they are able and skilled and gifted enough to figure it out. I don't want you to feel like you need to constantly come back to me, right? And so when we start to do that, it's also helping Annie to understand and my assistant understand like how to navigate the problem space. It's also teaching me how to trust that, like, all right, this is the right solution. I don't need to fact check and micromanage. She did the three, she's telling me why it's the one, and she's helping me understand it. But even just little rules like that have made like all the difference in terms of how we've been working together. So again, you're gonna be very tempted, I think, when you are delegating, especially if it's for your business, because it's precious, right? You're so used to carrying everything on your own. And now you're learning how to delegate and trust other folks with aspects of that business. But part of it is again, I like to remind my clients, you have to remember the ways that you were treated in corporate and remind yourself, am I falling back into those patterns too? Am I being gracious in terms of how to understand and learn? Am I making them feel like they are skilled and gifted and they can figure this out, right? So those things are like really important. Yeah. Annie, I'm curious as you kind of reflect on especially me and my friend and as you compare, do you feel like it's ever too early for someone to work with an assistant or to hire an assistant? I'm curious about some of your thoughts on that.
So I think what a person should ask themselves is, am I actually ready to collaborate, or do I just want relief with changing how I operate, right?
Mhm.
Or do I want someone to complete tasks for me, or do I want someone who can help me think? Those are two
Yeah.
different things, right? Am I ready to collaborate? Am I ready to delegate all these little things? Sometimes it feels like it took longer for Vivianne to record this task when she could have done it herself, right? But it's really the little things. What she's actually doing is uncharging her mind, right? Like
Mm,
create space. So those are the things I'm gonna do. If you're not ready, if you just want relief with tasks, then you can hire I don't know, you can go to Fiverr, or you can hire people to do that specific task. But an assistant will it's I know it's a really vulnerable thing to do, right? You're opening
mhm,
your mind, your business, your personal life sometimes.
mhm.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of a couple of questions you could ask yourself. Also, am I spending too much time holding things that someone else could help me carry?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
those three questions you could ask yourself to see if you're really ready to hire an assistant, or you can just hire help.
I think that's really great, and I appreciate the reminder of this is like a relationship. It's not just like you're hiring, yeah, a task person, a servant to do these things, right? This is like an actual relationship, and it's also what makes your business experience better too. So, one thing I appreciate about Annie, so whenever I go on PTO or a break, I know Annie always gets nervous because I then come back with a bajillion ideas. And I'm someone who have a lot of ideas, I wanna do a lot, and Annie has been that last line of defense from saving me from myself. So I'll come back from break, I'm like, "Yeah, and you wanna do this, this, and this, and I wanna try and do this." "That sounds great, but let's look at your calendar and see if you actually have capacity emotionally as well as time related to do those things." I'm like, "Ah, yeah, you're right." Instead of her just being a yes person. You actually don't want an assistant that's just like a yes. Yep, let's do it. No problem. Annie is helping me because she knows that if I overcommit, if I overextend, I'm gonna hate myself in the future. It's gonna make it more difficult in terms of working, right? So Annie's always like that last line of defense and that gut check for me, which I really appreciate. And so I'll build on your answer too in terms of I think I was actually talking to a client about this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I think One of the clearest signs that this person hired too early was resentment. If you find yourself irritated that they didn't just know what to do, that's not a them problem. That's a you problem, dressed up as a them problem. It means that you handed off work you hadn't actually defined, and now you're frustrated that they can't read your mind. And so I've watched founders, entrepreneurs fall into that loop, and it's a painful thing to watch because the assistant is doing their best with what you gave them. Kind of like what Annie was saying. I can only do with so much of what's been in front of me and what I have. And if all you've given your assistant is a vibe, then they're not going to really be able to do the work that you want them to do. Another tell is when you're paying them out of hope instead of out of revenue. This is a more candid and tougher thing to say. But if hiring is contingent on the next launch going well, the next client closing, the next thing happening, you didn't make a hiring decision. You made a bet. And you shouldn't bet with other people's lives or livelihoods. We don't appreciate it when employers do it to us, so why do we do that with other people, right? And again, bets are fine in business, but you should know you're making one. The version where this goes wrong is you start making weird, scarcity driven decisions because now there's a person depending on you and you're not in a peaceful posture anymore, right? You're in a survival one. And I think that's just a really bad place to lead from. And it tends to then bleed into how you treat the other person that you hired. So the audit that I have people ask themselves is like, all right, let's say I've hired someone already. Am I feeling resentful because they're not showing up in the way that I want them to? They're not doing the tasks in the ways that I thought they should. Thinking about your finances in terms of, okay, am I paying them from a place of hope? Did I hand them work that they couldn't articulate? Things like that, I think are really good signals that you probably hired too early. But Annie, I'm curious about this because so with some of our one-on-one clients, we actually will source and find an assistant. We'll train them up and then we'll also help to automate certain things within people's businesses. We only do it with some of our clients. And Annie is actually the one who is reaching out to her network. She's finding the assistants, she's training them up, and then we're implementing them into our client's business. I'm curious, Annie, maybe you could share a little bit about like when you are thinking about bringing on an assistant, even think about our last client that we just got an assistant for yesterday. What do you feel like actually matters when you're looking for an assistant? Is it skills, fit, values? What actually gets someone in the door and what's a deal breaker that people don't talk about?
First, after going through interviewing assistants, I think it's very important for them to be curious.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the biggest thing that you can if the assistant is curious, it's gonna be easier for you to work. They need to be the skills are basic, right? Client tech, because this is a virtual thing. So for me, connecting the client with the assistant is what the client needs, right? What is actually and thinking about our last client, he really needs a person to communicate with his clients. So I really needed somebody, an assistant who is really open, like really a people skilled, yeah, even enthusiastic. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
She's not gonna need she's gonna put her plus one of the biggest red flags is someone who needs to be managed all the time. Or an assistant that does exactly what you did, what you said. That's not gonna be that's not gonna be great. You need somebody to be like, we're not psychic, but we learn patterns. With knowing the client, we get to figure out patterns. So I think that's what an assistant needs.
Yeah, that resonates. I feel to your point, skills are the floor, but they're not the ceiling. And that's a really important differentiation to understand. If someone can't do the work, you have a different problem, right? But finding people who can do the work is usually what's breaking founders. The internet is full of capable people. So for me, it's always important to remind yourself skill scarcity isn't the bottleneck, everything else is. You can, again, I've had weeks where I'm like, Annie, I read this book on delegation and systems. Drop everything and just read that for the next few days, just so you're in alignment, right? Or, hey, take this course about Shopify. And I've had Annie spin up Shopify landing pages and things for me because now she's trained in it. Or, hey, I'm getting, it's a lot of time to handle this one task. Can you think about ways that we could automate it, design the system for me and build it? And she'll build it using Zapier, right? But that's because I had a week where all I had her do was go through Zapier's learning modules and just, understand how to use it. So skill scarcity is a good thing. You can teach people, they can learn, right? But I also will say too, one thing I've appreciated about you, Annie, I mean, many things, is I do think values matter. We are very aligned in terms of our values, how we think about people, how we think about certain situations. And I think because of that, I feel your excitement and your curiosity about the things that I'm doing, the things that we're building, even with Humanity Centered as well as with Truth Courage Inc. And so values are really important as well. And everyone says that they care about integrity and communication and all these things. It's on your website, right? So when I'm hiring now, I'm not really listening for values in the abstract. I'm more so watching for how values show up under pressure. I want to know how someone talks about former bosses that didn't treat them well, right? Are they more reflective or are they more bitter? I want to know how they describe a project that didn't work out. Do they own their part or does it always come back to someone else's incompetence? You learn more in those kind of questions than in an hour of values talk, right? And so I think too, like when I'm thinking about, what is it you're actually looking for? We keep saying this, but being curious and being a learner is truly everything. And I actually think too, it's ideal for the client to be like interested in the things that you're working on. So we had a client, they had a very niche business. He does marketing for dance studios that only do dance classes for kids. Super niche, right? We did end up finding an assistant who has experience in customer service and experience, but she was also involved in dance. So she was, like, interested and bought into this, right? And they're still working together. It's been a couple years now. Even in terms of the assistant that we just got one of our clients yesterday, she has that customer service experience, she has interpreter experience, and she's interested in working really closely with people, and she enjoys it, which is perfect because that's the exact thing that our client needs support with, and now this assistant is gonna learn more and have more experience about the things that interest her. So I'm always thinking about how do I not only again level up from a skill perspective, someone I'm working with, but can I also level them up in skills that interest them and that also benefit me? Before I get into a red flags question, I was looking in the form. I do want to answer one question that came through about examples of how Annie helps me. And so Annie helps me both on the business side and the personal side. When you're a business owner, the personal side affects the business. So it will be even things like, I need a plumber. Annie, can you please help me find a plumber within a 30-mile radius? She knows that in terms of Google reviews, I want them to have at least a 4.7 and above 10 reviews. I'll have her pull a list of the potential folks, and then I'll have her tell me which one she recommends and why. And then she'll go and schedule that for me. Now, typically, that would maybe take me 30 minutes, 20 minutes, right? If I'm like online looking, I'm calling, I'm seeing, I'm scheduling. But now Annie can help me with that so I can focus more on my client work. Sometimes Annie gets these weird requests for me. I'm just talking about the personal side where I'm like, just really want a new tattoo. And I'm finding myself down this rabbit hole of looking for a tattoo artist. And one day I was like, Annie, can you just pull a list of tattoo artists within a 2-hour radius who do black and gray realism? Here's examples of what I mean by that. And can you just pull a list so I could just look at it later? So that way I'm like pulling myself out of the rabbit hole and the welcome distraction of looking for tattoo artists for 1 hour in the middle of the workday. And at least now I have this list, I can go look at that later. On the business side, Annie helps me with everything. So incredibly helpful. We actually have 3 meetings a week. The meetings are literally titled Get Your Life Together. And Annie and I meet on the call to talk about we go through all my inboxes. I do have some automations in my inboxes, and Annie has helped me with that. To all my coaching clients go to a certain box, anything from my attorney goes to a certain folder, like all these things. We walk through the things that either she can respond on my behalf or she's already responded on my behalf. Hey, I already took the lead and responded to these things and scheduled these things out. And then she'll bring up, hey, here are the things that I'm not sure what you want me to do with. Now, I've been working with Annie for about 4 years. I think it probably took maybe 6-ish months or so to really feel like I could just allow her to be in my inbox. That trust and that rapport was there. But Annie's in my inbox. She helps sorts through it. I have 4 inboxes, right? So I have to go through the different emails and she's on top of it. So my inbox is at inbox 0. Everything's sorted accordingly. She's handling stuff. Things are being flagged that only I can handle. So I take care of it. We also then have a time where we look at the calendar and we always look out 2 weeks ahead. And at that point, it's gut checking me in terms of my time and my availability. What are the things I need to move? What are the things that, hey, wow, you actually have overlapping things happening on this day? Annie will then reach out to those folks and reschedule for me instead of me going and playing calendar Tetris. She helps me in terms of anytime I do a podcast, Annie always edits it, uploads it, does a first pass at the show notes, does a first pass at the newsletter that's sent out as well. So, I trust Annie with a lot of copy and writing, and I just take another pass and look at it. A lot of automations that need to be set up. Hey, I want to do a webinar on this day and time. Here's a description. She creates the form in ConvertKit or Kit, they rebranded themselves. She creates the form, creates the automation. So when people sign up, they get tagged a certain way and they get added to a certain sequence. She writes the copy for that. So, and again, and a lot of that comes from a lot of reps that Annie has had. And because she edits all my transcripts, she really has a good understanding of how I think. Annie is also someone where I will hop on a call with her and be like, hey, couldn't sleep last night. I have a bunch of things on my mind. Let me just share them with you from a business standpoint to kind of know like where I'm at. So Annie's usually one of the first people to know when something is happening in the business because I need her to understand the context of how I'm working and what is a priority for me. So that will be we have rules as well, certain boundaries. Because Annie and I are actually friends now. So, but even with that, we have boundaries. So WhatsApp is just friendship, talking stuff, and Discord is strictly business. Even with my best friend, who was also under a contract, still always put family and friends under contracts. We would use Discord for talking business, and then texting was just friendship stuff. So that helps in terms of some of that. And so for us, those boundaries are really important. Annie knows that sometimes I just can't sleep. I have a million things in my mind, and I might just send her something in Discord at 11 at night. But she already knows, so don't look at it, don't respond to it. She turns off her Discord when she logs off. It's more of we have an understanding of I put it here so I don't forget, and we could talk about it first thing in the morning. But I'm very clear in terms of work boundaries. I don't expect Annie to work weekends. There has been a time or 2 where she has, and I give her a day off during another time, in the next week, right? So for me, it's about balance and being fair and communicating. Let's dive into some red flags. Annie?
From founders. From
Yeah.
founders to assistants. So what do you want first?
Yeah, what are the red flags an assistant watches for in a founder? So now people on the call can be like, "Oh yeah, what are they looking in for me that would make them say, 'Ooh, that's a red flag.'"
First of all, the constant urgency for everything, right? Like
Yeah.
this is this is really important. This is really urgent. Yeah, not being clear on how they communicate, but expecting us to be a mind reading, right? I think what you said is really important. When you give me context, it's not gossip. I love gossip, but I don't take it
Yeah.
like that.
Tease me.
I really understand like why is it so important, or it can give me an understanding on what to prioritize in case you.
Mm,
So that helps a lot. Not respecting the boundaries or time, right?
mhm.
Wanting support but not letting go. Sometimes it can feel like micromanaging. Okay, you already taught me. I know how to do it, but you're still over.
Mhm.
The red flag. Yeah, treating assistants just like admin instead of support. And yeah, just seeing somebody is not emotionally ready to
Mm,
look for help. And it's really I've had two on-site clients that have been really hard for me to work with because they're like, when they minimize the job, this is really easy. Just you can do it. Yeah, yeah, just figure it out. That's not easy because you spend a lot of time like looking for the answer and stuff. So if they don't have in their mind clear what they want, it's gonna be really hard for us. So that's really a big red flag. That's
Mhm.
that's when I knew, no, I'm not gonna continue with this client. I think it's time to search for another one.
Yeah. I think it's also why we only find assistants to certain clients that I'm working with. There's some clients where I'm like, I know you need an assistant, but I know this assistant will not have a good experience with you. And I want them to have a good quality of life. So part of that too is I like what you're saying about the emotional readiness. Part of it is as a founder, are you able to admit that you need help? And if able to admit help before everything is burning around you. You don't have to wait till last minute, right? So for me, when I'm thinking about clients where I'm like, I'm willing to offer this additional service that me and Annie do for some of our folks. After working with folks, I get a sense of, do they acknowledge that they need help or that they're struggling? If I have a client who I have to, oh, your house is on fire. No, the heat is just on. If I have to really fight to convince them that they're like struggling, then they're not ready for an assistant, right? For me, it's if I'm working with someone and just by how they're treating either other folks in the community or even how I'm hearing how they talk about other people in their life, I'm like, if there isn't just a general level of respect and empathy, then I don't want them working with an assistant. Especially because the assistants that we source our folks with are based in Mexico. So I'm like, I feel very strongly about how my American clients need to act and behave, which is good people. Be good people, right? I'll say this in terms of red flags within an assistant, and I can part of it is based off of briefly with the one I had for a day and a half, and the other is from friends who have assistants. I think a red flag is if they aren't proactive in terms of sure, if you're like 5 tasks that I've given you, but if they're willing to think outside the box in terms of even anticipating some things within those tasks that need to be handled, then maybe I didn't specifically say in black and white. For me, that's a red flag because it tends to mean they can be more of a yes person, right? But also, they're not going to be like a partner with me in the business and they're not going to take initiative. Again, because I don't want to micromanage ever. I don't have time for it. So for me, I do need someone who's willing to take initiative. One thing I've appreciated about Annie, again, many things, is Annie will bring up, "Hey, I was thinking about this thing that you've been working on, and what if we did this?" Or, "Hey, I noticed that, you've been really struggling with your sleep lately, and I know you said you've been, like, having on your mind. So what if we had a session where we talked about more things you need to take off your plate?" So, again, just being able to sense and respond is really important. I also this is subtle, but I do take it seriously, watching how they talk about previous employers and clients. So, if it's very gossipy, slanderous, just they sound bitter, resentful, you probably should be talking to your therapist about this in this way, that's a red flag. And again, their previous bosses probably were difficult. That happens, right? But the way that someone talks about people they used to work with is the way that they're also going to talk about other people that either you're introducing them to or even you, right? So for me, it's just, I just want to be aware of how people talk about folks. You learn a lot about that. And again, Annie and I have said this as well, but the lack of if your assistant tells you you're never wrong, never flags that something in your calendar is unrealistic, never says, hey, maybe we should rethink this, or maybe this could be a little different, then you have a yes person. And yes, people are dangerous because they let you walk into bad decisions politely. So I feel like the assistants, my friends who have assistants, the ones who made the biggest difference are the ones who'll tell you kindly and directly, hey, you're overcommitting. Or, "Hey, that's an idea. It's really great, but I'm wondering if we need to explore A, B, and C as well to see if that works." I That is just a key support. I see this question of and you said a comment earlier about treating you like you're just admin and not support. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you meant by that?
Yes, this was more about as a founder letting tasks go. There's a lot more that an assistant can do than just admin stuff. Just you feel this. I'm paying you, so you do whatever I say, and this is how. This is yes. There's my idea. This is how it has to be because I'm
Mhm,
paying you. You know, instead of a support and being open to ideas. Okay, I know you have a system here, but I figure out a way to do it better, and this can benefit you. So if
mhm.
that would be like the red flag if they're not open to, because then as an assistant or even as a person, right? You lose interest and you just show up for your job then.
Yeah. I think another way I could address that too is admin. If you treat someone as just admin support, it's like, all right, they're just checking off boxes. I'm in the email, I'm scheduling your calendar. But a really good assistant who understands you and understands your business can actually show up in such a more supportive way. Where I talked to a lot of solopreneurs where they're like, I feel really lonely doing business by myself. But if you actually have an assistant who worked with you as a partner and is supporting your business, you wouldn't experience that. There's a level of vulnerability then that needs to happen when you're talking to your assistant. So, Annie, I remember in early 2023, this is when the UX industry was initially blowing up and falling apart. And our clients were cutting their contracts, they were delaying it. And I could have kept all that to myself. But when I had my team meeting, I also brought Annie into it. I'm like, hey, here's the real financially. We need to figure something out and pivot or we're screwed. This is candidly speaking, right? But sharing Annie and inviting Annie into that part of the business, Annie then was on top of like, all right, well, here's some other things I could do, or here's some ways I could think about, helping with customer acquisition. And, so again, bringing Annie in as a support instead of a checklist. Hey, here's these tasks, go do them. And thanks for being my assistant. So much more than that. Right. I am going to swing into Q&A. I've been trying to weave in some of the questions as they've been coming into the form. But before I go into Q&A, I do wanna make a brief invitation for folks who are in the room. Uh, as you I at least I hope you know in terms of what we've been talking about right now, hiring isn't actually a hiring problem. If anything, it's more of a clarity problem, right? It's more of a systems problem. It's more of a, "What am I building? Is this the version I'm building, the one that I actually want to live in inside?" problem. Do I feel like I have clarity in terms of how someone can help me make this vision more real without needing myself to run into the ground? And so when I think about things like the overwhelm or the bottleneck pattern, the way your business runs on just sheer willpower alone instead of on a real infrastructure, the quiet way that we work has been doing a lot of that heavy lifting. But none of that gets fixed by adding a person to the chaos. None of it disappears just because you finally hired help. And so one of the things that I've always been really passionate about is how do I help more people feel confident in their ability to build and sustain a business? And so in June, I'm hosting this event called The Walkout. It's a 2.5 day version of what we started today. And it's where we move from naming the pattern to actually building something that doesn't recreate them. So I'm bringing in folks in UX and tech who have left to build their own thing. Rachel Dekas, if you're familiar with some of her work, she's coming back to helping us understand a little bit more about the healing aspect and relational aspect of business. And this one's a little different. So if you've gone to the one in January, this one's structured differently in that I'm bringing in an attorney, I'm bringing in my accountant, and I'm also bringing in a health insurance specialist, especially for my Americans who, the system's a little broken. So how do we equip you with a few professionals who can help you feel a lot more confident in actually building an idea and seeing it possible? So I hope that if you're enjoying this conversation, if you're more curious about how do I get out of a codependent relationship with my employer and actually learn how to be more self-sufficient and actually build an idea into something, this is a really safe space for you to do that and explore that. All right, cool. Let me dive into a couple other questions that I haven't been able to weave into our conversation today that's come through. One question came in around how do you think about and approach pay as your assistant ramps up and becomes more of a strategic partner? So I can give some context and tea into this. When I started working with Annie, the platform that had hired her was charging me about 1,000 a month, and they were paying Annie 500.
Mhm. 5, 600.
Yeah, and I was like, "How about I steal you off this platform? I'll pay you the full 1,000, and as time grows, happy to pay you more." So the system that I work on now with Annie, I bumped Annie up to 2K a month about, I don't know, year and a half ago, 2 years in, year and a half in. But I bonus Annie throughout the year too. So there are certain projects that maybe I'll pull her into. Granted, she would be pulled in to help me with anyways, but now I bonus her on top of that. And I think it's for me, it's about I always want to make sure I'm doing right by the people that are working with me. I want to make sure that they're having a good experience, that they're learning and experiencing the benefit and the growth of the business. So that's how I think about that in terms of when I'm having more confidence when Annie is touching things that are actually impacting deals and actually impacting revenue, so does the amount that I pay her, that also increases. If you're curious about the cost of an assistant, for us, when we're looking for part-time assistants, 20 hours a week each month, that we source our assistants from Mexico, and average is about $500 to $600 a month versus 40 hours a week is around 1,000 to 1,200 a month. And that's considered really good. So for me, again, I had a client the other day be like, "I don't know how you do everything." I'm like, "I have Annie. That's how I do it." Literally the only reason. So yeah, so that's how I think about it. I'm definitely more of a proponent of pay more, do right, do bonus structures if you can. And if you struggle with that, then that's more of a business assigned issue than anything. So I'm like, all right, how do I design my business to be able to support Annie and support the other folks that work with me? I had someone else ask around how do I use AI? How do we use AI in our professional relationship? Part of this has been to help Annie understand my tone and how I write. So even before all the AI hype, I wrote all the time. I know I'm a strong writer. So I have run through a bunch of either email replies, like super simple email replies, even show notes that I've written in the past, and have run that through AI so Andy understands here's the structure. Here are the kind of things that I say and I don't say. Like whenever I use an emoji, I use it as a period. I don't do a period, a space, and then an emoji, right? There's certain stylistic things that I've used AI to surface those patterns for Annie. So Annie's keeping those things in mind when she's writing content for me. And again, part of that is just style. Even, I do like to use an exclamation point or two when I write. So even, her creating SOPs and rules around, all right, don't use an exclamation point back to back, use one in the beginning and then maybe 4 sentences later, you can use another one. But that comes from pattern recognition, which AI is good for pattern recognition. Use it for pattern recognition. Don't use it to outsource your creativity. Otherwise, we're living in an AI slop world and no one wants that. It's not good. So for me, and my recommendation, if you're as you're thinking about using AI with your assistant, is what are the things that AI can surface from a pattern perspective that helps your assistant to better articulate what you need, how you write, and how you show up. So those are things that I'm always thinking about. Of how can I help Annie understand me better through those levels of surfacing the different patterns. Yo, and with that, we are at time cooking. Annie, thank you so much for I know I've never brought you on to like a webinar. So being willing and able to put your face out there, answer questions, share the tea. Thank you so much for, yeah, just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing and, yeah, for trusting, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm here
We'll
to
have to
help.
think about some other sessions where people can ask more questions and we could, break more tea about the things behind the scenes. Please drink some water, my lovely dehydrated friends. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and we'll chat soon. Thanks for hanging out with us and diving into some of these real and unfiltered conversations. We know your time is valuable, and so we don't take it for granted. If today's episode made you think, if it challenged you, or gave you something new to consider, we'd love for you to hit that follow button on whatever streaming service you're using. That way, you'll never miss an episode when we drop them. And if you want to go even deeper, sign up for our newsletter at choosecourageinc.com, and you'll get updates on new episodes, access to exclusive freebies, and first dibs on coaching opportunities and other resources to help you make bold moves in your life and business. So we appreciate you, we see you, and we're rooting for you. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort, and a friendly reminder to drink some water.